Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Imagine a city, right? Cloaked in perpetual twilight, rain slicking the streets.
Reflecting those neon signs.
Exactly, all blurred and distorted. And then a figure emerges from the shadows, maybe a trench-coated detective, down on his luck.
Or just an ordinary guy suddenly way over his head.
Yeah, tangled in something far bigger, far darker than he ever imagined, and probably drawn in by a captivating, dangerous woman.
Always the woman.
That feeling,
Yeah.
that whole atmosphere, well, that's the intoxicating pull of film noir. And today, we're plunging headfirst into a stack of sources that explore this captivating, dark cinematic universe.
Right, from its troubled beginnings.
All the way through to its surprising, vibrant modern-day manifestations.
What's truly fascinating here isn't just the look of these films, the aesthetic, but how deeply they're rooted in the human psyche and the history, the tumultuous historical context of their birth. So this deep dive, it isn't merely a journey through film history. It's really an exploration of how profound societal anxieties, groundbreaking psychological theories, even things like technical constraints.
Budget limitations and stuff.
Exactly. How they all converge to forge a genre that honestly continues to resonate profoundly with audiences today. We're going to look at not just what makes a noir film unique,
But why? Why it still grabs us.
precisely why its dark allure still holds such power over us.
So our mission today is to distill those vital nuggets of knowledge and insight from everything you've provided. We want to give you a genuine shortcut, to being truly well-informed about film noir.
And its descendants.
Right, its dynamic descendants, neo-noir and revisionary noir. So get ready to uncover some surprising facts, maybe challenge a few assumptions, and experience plenty of those aha moments.
Should be good.
Okay, so to properly kick us off on this shadowy journey, let's establish our foundation. What exactly is film noir? When we talk about classic film noir, we're primarily talking about a specific cinematic style, right? Crime dramas, thrillers.
Mostly from the 1940s and 50s, that's the classic period.
But it's crucial to understand its influence didn't just stop there. It's not some historical relic stuck in black and white.
No, definitely not. Its dark tendrils, as you might say, stretch far beyond that initial period. You've got the revival films, 70s, 80s, often called neo-noirs.
Like a fresh coat of paint on those familiar shadows?
Kind of, yeah. And pretty much everything since then, right up to today, continues to draw heavily from that foundational scaffolding, the DNA built by that classic period.
So what we have here is a genre with, extraordinarily deep roots and an incredibly long, pervasive reach.
And what's genuinely remarkable, really, is that the term film noir itself didn't even start in Hollywood. Nope. American filmmakers were apparently, by and large, utterly mystified when the label was first applied to their work. They just thought they were churning out, inexpensive, moody thrillers.
Just another B-movie, maybe?
Pretty much. The credit for coining the term black film and movie noir goes to French critics, specifically Nino Frank and Jean-Pierre Chartier back in 1946.
How did that happen?
Well, it was under very unique circumstances. After World War II ended, they got access to this massive 5-year backlog of American films, stuff that had been banned in France during the Nazi occupation from 40 to 45.
Wow, imagine seeing 5 years of movies all at once.
Exactly. This sudden immersion, this concentrated burst, let them immediately recognize something distinctively different about these American productions. A shared visual language, thematic resonances, things Hollywood hadn't even consciously named.
So the French saw the pattern.
They saw the force, yeah.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that some French films from the 1930s had actually anticipated similar themes and visual styles, so maybe the ground was fertile for that recognition.
And the name itself, black film.
It was inspired by the popular série noire crime novels that had just started appearing in post-war France, a perfect evocative fit for these dark, gritty movies.
That's absolutely fascinating. The very name for this quintessential American phenomenon came from an outside perspective, from a fresh post-war lens. It's almost as if they needed that distance to see it clearly.
It seems that way.
And speaking of vision, the look and feel of film noir is so distinctive, it's arguably as crucial as any character. It's almost a character itself, setting the mood.
Oh, precisely. The core visual elements of classic noir are unmistakable, instantly recognizable, almost always shot in black and white.
Which really lends itself to that duality, the starkness.
Absolutely. And they made extensive, deliberate use of low-key lighting, meaning, a single dominant light source creating these striking shadow effects that weren't just aesthetic, they were thematic.
You also see those odd, unbalanced camera angles all the time.
Definitely. Extreme low angles, high angles, tilted shots, Dutch angles, all designed to disorient the viewer to reflect the internal turmoil of the characters.
And this, look, it didn't just spring out of nowhere, right? There were influences.
Oh, absolutely. There's a direct lineage from German Expressionist cinema. You think of groundbreaking films like Robert Wien's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari back in 1919.
Well, that far back.
Yeah, or Murnau's Nosferatu, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and M from 1931. These German films, born out of that period of profound crisis after World War I, they really established that expressionist style, distorted realities, exaggerated shadows, that sense of psychological unease.
Perfect for expressing dread.
Exactly. And that became a powerful foundational influence on noir's visual texture. It brought those European art house sensibilities into American crime thrillers.
And what's interesting, you touched on this earlier, this wasn't just a purely artistic choice. Budget actually played a significant, almost accidental role, didn't it?
It often did, yes. Our sources reveal that small budgets and tight shooting schedules inadvertently ensured the dark lighting and tight camera shots.
Right. Filmmakers working with limited resources and time found these techniques were efficient ways to create atmosphere without needing elaborate sets or tons of lights.
And that frugality, kind of accidentally, contributed to that distinctive, downbeat and depressing mood.
Like, take Boris Ingster's Stranger on the Third Floor from 1940, often cited as one of the first unadulterated film noirs.
A key early one.
It was shot on a shoestring budget, apparently. Yet it beautifully showcases these very elements. It even has this truly haunting dream sequence that's almost pure German Expressionism, right?
Textbook example, yeah. It powerfully demonstrates how constraints can surprisingly foster incredible creativity and even define an entire genre's look.
Absolutely. And the lighting in noir, it's not just about illuminating a scene. It's often noticeable more by its absence than its presence.
That's a great way to put it. This scarcity of light is absolutely key. It embodies a desolate tone and reflects this profound preoccupation with the grotesque. It's not just about what you see, but what's strategically hidden in those vast stretches of darkness.
Creates suspense, unease.
Foreboding, definitely. It emphasizes the ambiguity of the world these characters live in. The light itself often feels harsh, artificial, from a bare bulb or a street lamp, rarely natural or comforting.
So the shadow itself becomes a character, almost a trap.
Very much so.
Okay, so we firmly established the distinctive visual landscape, the look of film noir. Now let's shift our focus to the fascinating, often troubled individuals who inhabit this shadowy world. The typical male protagonist. He's not your usual hero, is he?
Not at all. Often an unconventional hero, or more accurately, an anti-hero. He can be deeply flawed, sometimes even explicitly evil or psychotic.
But just as often, he's just an ordinary guy. Maybe well-meaning even.
Right, thrust into extraordinary, often terrifying circumstances completely beyond his control. And what makes him particularly compelling, and frankly often doomed in noir, is how he's frequently portrayed as weak or ineffectual, confused, and lost.
Particularly at the mercy of women. That part seems key.
It's a recurring theme. Think of classic examples. Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon. Despite his tough exterior, he finds himself profoundly manipulated.
Or Edward G. Robinson. He played a few of those roles.
Yeah. In The Woman in the Window or Scarlet Street, often seemingly respectable men whose lives just unravel with terrifying speed, plunging them into a criminal underworld they can barely comprehend, usually struggling with some profound crisis of conscience, faced with impossible choices.
And this brings us inevitably to maybe the most iconic figure, the femme fatale.
Ah, yes, the femme fatale. Quintessential noir. Their cinematic roots, you can trace them back to the tough mall characters from 1930s gangster films.
But they took it to another level.
They really did. The femme fatale elevates that archetype to a truly dangerous art form. These aren't just conniving bad girls. They are strong, intelligent, immensely capable women, often far more so than the male protagonists.
And crucially, they use those characteristics, their wit, their intelligence, their powerful sexuality.
To the detriment of the male protagonist,
Yeah.
Absolutely, drawing him into a web of deceit and danger from which he rarely escapes.
Is there a prime example that comes to mind?
Barbara Stanwyck's Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity from 1944. It's the absolute gold standard. While Walter Neff narrates the story, gives his perspective, the film fundamentally revolves around her actions, her will, her relentless machinations.
Right, there's no story without her pulling the strings.
None at all. Her cold, calculating determination is the true driving force of that film.
That dynamic is absolutely central to the noir experience. The anti-hero, he's typically caught in this agonizing, impossible choice, often presented as a stark dichotomy, right?
Usually, yeah. On one side, there's often a tragic woman, someone who might represent stability, traditional morality, maybe a chance at a normal life.
And on the other,
The alluring, dangerous femme fatale. And in true noir fashion, he almost always makes the flawed choice, succumbing to her charms and plunging himself into a moral abyss.
it's frequently that classic triangle dynamic, but with a twist. The femme fatale isn't just picking one man.
No, she's often manipulating both for her own ruthless gain, expertly playing them off each other.
Like Rita Hayworth in The Lady from Shanghai.
Exactly. Her character, Elsa Bannister, in Orson Welles' film from '47, she effortlessly weaves this complex web of deception that ensnares not just her husband, but also the unsuspecting protagonist. It's less about love, much more about raw power, control, and lethal manipulation.
Chilling stuff.
Indeed. And this leads us directly to the deeper thematic underpinnings of film noir. Its pervasive sense of moral ambiguity and existential dread.
Yeah, that feeling hangs heavy over these films.
They are fundamentally characterized by a mood of pervasive anxiety and an air of moral crisis and uncertainty. The characters are rarely, if ever, straightforwardly good or bad.
They live in the gray areas.
Exactly. Caught between their desires, their flaws, the corrupting forces around them. This blurring of lines, this collapse of boundaries between good and evil, virtue and vice, it inherently disorients viewers. It creates a shared feeling of the anguish or insecurity, which is an undeniable hallmark of the genre.
Leaves you questioning everyone's motives. Even your own, maybe.
Potentially, yeah.
So if we pull back and ask, what does this all truly mean for the worldview of film noir?
Well, it means these films are deeply skeptical of high-minded pronouncements, of grand moral statements, and they are profoundly pessimistic about the future.
They often suggest that life has no inherent meaning, that existence is absurd, right? Like a cosmic joke.
Pretty much, though occasionally you get a hint of philosophical existentialism, where characters might attempt to forge their own meaning within that bleak, indifferent landscape, even if that meaning is ultimately tragic.
Definitely not a feel-good genre.
Not usually, no. It's a stark, often brutal reflection of a world without easy answers.
And this inherent cynicism often functions as a direct critique of the cherished American dream.
Oh, absolutely. In the world of noir, that dream isn't presented as a land of boundless opportunity and upward mobility. Instead, it's twisted into an unpredictable urban nightmare of gloom and futility.
So ambition, desire for wealth, the pursuit of a better life.
Yeah.
It often leads to disaster.
Frequently, yes. It leads not to success, but to tragic, inevitable downfalls. You see this vividly in, say, Stanley Kubrick's The Killing from 1956. That meticulously planned heist goes wrong because of greed and desperation. Everyone is undone.
Or Sunset Boulevard.
Perfect example. Sunset Boulevard from 1950. The glittering facade of Hollywood masks a world of delusion, exploitation, and ultimately, madness. The dream becomes a trap, a gilded cage, or just a broken promise.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit now and set the historical stage for the birth of classic noir. Our sources paint this compelling picture of the early 1940s as a complex, ambiguous, even contradictory world, but most of all, as a troubled world.
That turbulence, that pervasive sense of unease, it wasn't just a backdrop, it was truly ripe fruit for noir's birth. It wasn't just a stylistic choice by Hollywood, it was a deeply ingrained reflection of the collective anxieties and profound shifts of the era.
The zeitgeist demanded it almost.
You could say that, yeah. The psychological impact of World War II on American culture and psyche simply cannot be overstated.
The human cost was immense.
Staggering. Our sources give stark statistics. 405,000 U.S. personnel dead, 607,000 wounded, with over 200,000 suffering from mental trauma. And the societal ripple effect. 183,000 American children lost their fathers.
Devastating.
Richard Lingman, cited in our materials, suggests these facts left the American public emotionally cold. Not indifference, but a societal mask, a collective reaction to deal with trauma for which there were limited outlets.
And PTSD wasn't really understood then, was it?
Hardly at all. Shell shock, as they called it, was barely understood. Sufferers were often hidden from Main Street, their struggles unacknowledged, untreated, a generation wrestling with invisible wounds.
And compounding that, our sources talk about an aggressive campaign to hide the real face of war through culture.
Right. Instead of acknowledging the immense human toll, there was this widespread cultural push celebrating military preparedness, painting a guts and glory portrait of the conflict.
The government even got involved.
Yeah, the Office of War Information's Bureau of Motion Pictures apparently urged studios to slip into films a lesson on how to cope with loss, essentially dictating how trauma should be portrayed, or more accurately, suppressed.
So a society struggling to balance its belief in an exceptional America.
More decent and high-minded than the rest of the world, yeah? With the grim reality of savagery accomplished overseas. This profound disconnect resulted in faded victory dreams and a deep identity crisis for the nation.
Undermining moral absolutes, shattering the idea that life was predictable or logical.
Exactly. The world no longer made clear sense.
And beyond the war's direct impact, there was a broader societal anxiety, wasn't there? Conformity, paranoia.
Definitely. That fueled the deeply seated emotions of the American psyche in the 40s and 50s, partly inherited from the Great Depression generation who'd lived through profound economic instability, and also from immigrant experiences. Many came from nations with tight controls on nonconformists.
Plus the Red Scare, McCarthyism.
Exactly, a lingering fear of being judged, of neighbors turning you in. In this paranoid world of post-war film noir, there was this pervasive suspicion. Even innocence is no defense against the misguided judgments of society. Trust was a luxury. Betrayal lurked everywhere.
And within this deeply anxious climate, there was a definite idea about gender roles that seems crucial for the femme fatale.
Inextricably linked. During the war, women stepped into roles traditionally held by men, factories, new responsibilities.
Posey the Riveter.
Right. But post-war, there was this concerted societal push for women to return to more rigidly defined pre-war roles, the feminine mystique.
So the femme fatale, she disrupts that.
She served to appear out of nowhere to disrupt middle-class life. Her independence, her ambition portrayed as a threat. And ultimately, by showing these powerful, dangerous women being punished or destroyed, the genre inadvertently aimed to reassert traditional gender roles.
Like a cultural warning. Don't step out of line.
Essentially, yeah. But there's a powerful feminist critique offering a counter-narrative.
Which sees her differently.
Yes, viewing the femme fatale not merely as a projection of male anxieties, but as a lioness of empowerment and sexual freedom. These characters, often depicted as apolitical rebels, explicitly use their sexual wiles to undermine patriarchal power.
Reflecting male anxiety about women's wartime roles in independence.
Exactly. While the male-centric narrative of classic noir frequently punished women who reach for power, the underlying fear of the feminine suggests men may have feared women precisely because they perceived them as having animosity towards males for their historical subjugation. It highlights a deep-seated cultural discomfort with female autonomy.
It's a truly fascinating, often tragic paradox. And the cultural narrative at the time didn't help. Psychoanalysts blamed women.
Our sources say they frequently blamed women for veterans' readjustment problems,
Yeah.
further reinforcing traditional roles, placing the burden of societal dysfunction on female shoulders.
So the femme fatale became symbolic of the anxieties and fears experienced by the American cultural inhabitants who sought to regain a past that never existed.
A past built to accommodate male ideology, an order the war had profoundly deconstructed. She was, in essence, the dream gone wrong, the negation of the myth of domestic bliss and male control.
And what about the economic side? America was booming, supposedly, but noir doesn't feel very prosperous.
Right. Despite that perception of a triumphant boom time, our sources remind us that lingering disillusionment and pockets of privation were still very much prevalent. Noir films, with their distinctive low-key lighting, cynical narration, atypical points of view, skillfully reflected this complex reality.
The psychological shocks of the wars kept reverberating.
Exactly, creating unease even amidst apparent prosperity. The shadows in noir weren't just about crime, they were about unseen economic struggles and psychological scars.
And our sources powerfully highlight how noir expressed the trauma of lost beliefs and the struggle to keep up in the consumer economy that was drowning everyday people. It wasn't just murder. It was desperation.
Consider Double Indemnity again. It's not just a murder plot. Phyllis and Walter are portrayed as victims of a consumer culture where the capitalists have taught them the way to take what they want.
Their actions fueled by this insatiable desire for money, a different life.
A dark reflection of the American dream corrupted by materialism. A profound critique of the dark side of American individualism, showing how that pursuit can lead to moral decay and, ultimately, destruction.
So beyond the immediate history and psychology, we need to loop back to the cinematic influences. German Expressionism was huge.
Absolutely foundational. Not just stylistic borrowing, it was a direct cultural transfusion. Many brilliant German filmmakers, giants like Fritz Lang, Robert Siodmak, Billy Wilder, Otto Preminger, immigrated to the U.S. and produced crucial work there.
Bringing their mastery of light and dark, distorted perspectives.
Exactly. Chiaroscuro, psychological themes, they seamlessly fused with the emerging American crime narrative, providing a sophisticated visual and thematic toolkit for noir.
But it wasn't solely German influence. Interestingly, French films played a part too.
Our sources acknowledge that, yes, French films of the 1930s had already anticipated many noir characteristics. Films like Pepe le Moko or Le Jour se lève had that fatalistic tone, that sense of doom, shadowy urban settings.
Before American noir really took hold.
Right. So while the French critics later coined the term film noir for American cinema, they were perhaps recognizing elements already percolating on both sides of the Atlantic. It's a rich, cross-cultural tapestry of dark influences.
And before we move on, we absolutely need to touch upon Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, 1941. Not technically noir, but
undeniably a proto-noir film. Its central character, Kane, is maybe too larger than life for the typical noir protagonist, who's often more of a pawn of fate.
but its influence on noir's development.
Profound and immediate. It came out just a month before The Maltese Falcon. Think of its groundbreaking, unusual camera angles and movements, its masterful play with lighting, its unbalanced compositions, that complex flashback narrative structure.
All things that became hallmarks of noir.
Exactly. They became defining characteristics. And of course, Welles himself went on to direct significant, iconic noir films later, like The Stranger in 46, The Lady from Shanghai in 47.
And Touch of Evil in 58, which some see as the bookend to classic noir.
Right, showing just how deeply ingrained Welles's vision became in the genre. Some even argue it's the first neo-noir, too, a real bridge.
Okay, here's where it gets really compelling. Because film noir delves incredibly deep into the human mind. It often feels less like a conventional story and more like a fevered dream that inevitably morphs into a nightmare.
That's a great description. Cinema, as an art form, has long been connected with the stuff of dreams because of its fundamental production of illusion. You sit in a dark room, images flash, you're transported, much like dreaming.
And the parallels between film, especially noir and dreams, are striking, almost uncanny.
They really are. Both film and dreams communicate meaning through signs and symbols, flashing images that sometimes form a narrative, other times make statements the mind refuses to access. Those deep subconscious truths or repressed fears surfacing as unsettling visuals or feelings.
Like surrealism tried to tap into.
Exactly. Surrealism, closely linked to psychoanalytic theory, explicitly sought to release dream images into the conscious mind, bring the subconscious to the fore. Noir, in this context, sits somewhere between accessible narrative and that ignored, repressed narrative.
Forcing the viewer to confront their shadow self.
Precisely. The unacknowledged, darker aspects of one's own personality, as Jung would call it. That's why noir can be described as quite possibly the turn from a dream into the nightmare. It rips away comforting illusions to reveal raw, unsettling truths.
And to unpack this further, to really get at the psychological undercurrents, Jungian psychology offers a powerful interpretive framework.
It really does. Carl Jung, initially Freud's student, later proposed the groundbreaking idea of a collective human unconscious.
Which is different from Freud's individual unconscious.
Yeah, Jung suggested humanity shares inherited ways of thinking, universal myths and archetypes like the femme fatale that transcend individual experience in generations, not just personal repressed memories.
So the femme fatale as an archetype, that's why she resonates so broadly?
That's the Jungian view, yes. A universal symbol of seductive danger deeply embedded within this collective unconscious.
And within Jung's framework, the self-archetype is crucial here, with two sides.
Exactly. The conscious revealed persona we present to the world and the repressed, often unacknowledged shadow. In film noir, the shadow plays an intricate part, influencing everything from the signature low-key lighting and mood to the darker, morally ambiguous storylines themselves.
The settings, too, right? Often limited, usually at night.
Cloaked in perpetual gloom, creating a profound sense of darkness, which represents a kind of death, a spiritual or moral death, an extinguishing of hope. Noir can be seen as either the failure to master the shadow, where characters are overwhelmed by darker impulses.
Or maybe assimilating it. Acknowledging it, but staying flawed.
Perhaps more accurately, yeah, assimilating it while continuing as flawed. The shadow, representing the personal unknown and hidden, is understood as the overwhelming power of irresistible impulse, the primal, unvarnished aspects of the psyche driving us to acts both profound and depraved.
This psychological framework resonates so deeply with that post-war era that birthed classic noir, humanity realizing its capacity for terrible acts. The atomic bomb.
A terrifying realization. This profound shift meant humans were suddenly living at odds with their world, with a terrifying new understanding of their own destructive potential. Noir, in this sense, served as a means to reflect on these events and achievements, often questioning their merit or the American memory regarding them.
Like societal therapy on the big screen?
A collective wrestling with guilt, trauma, the darker implications of progress. It gave voice to the unspoken anxieties of a generation.
So this brings us to a fundamental question. How does film noir challenge our core beliefs about human nature? It seems to push back against easy answers.
It does. It confronts head-on both the Enlightenment belief in inherent human benevolence and reasonableness that we're fundamentally good and rational, and the Puritan belief in innate depravity that we're inherently sinful. Noir refuses to neatly categorize.
So what does this all mean for how noir sees humanity?
It means noir creates a view of humanity that is ultimately human and therefore shadowed. It doesn't offer easy answers or comforting illusions. Instead, it unflinchingly exposes the blemishes of the human psyche, moral compromises, hidden desires, the terrifying capacity for cruelty.
And it highlights the terror of history that always threatens to erupt into the present.
Exactly. The lingering trauma, the threat of societal collapse, the idea that the past is never truly past. It's a raw, unflinching look at who we are, stripped of comforting illusions, asking us to confront the darkness within and around us.
Now, you might hear some critics argue that classic film noir is purely a product of its time, locked into the 40s and 50s, that it couldn't really evolve.
But our sources strongly disagree. They state, this could not be further from the truth. Noir has continued to have influence on American filmmaking, and such films as neo-noir do still exist, evolving with the times.
The core elements, the darkness, ambiguity, shadows, flawed characters, they just adapted.
Precisely. They adapted and deepened for new generations. We typically differentiate between neo-noir, roughly 60s to 90s, and revisionary noir, 21st century to present.
How do they differ, generally?
Well, neo-noir updates classic conventions in more minor ways. Maybe embracing color cinematography or benefiting from the collapse of the production code. We should talk about that. Chinatown from '74 is a perfect example. Classic noir style, but updated with a more cynical edge, a horrifying resolution.
And revisionary noir.
That pushes the envelope more radically. It actively encourages a reevaluation of the original films, redefines noir as a broader concept. Think Sin City from 2005, pushing violence and visual style way beyond classic noir.
But it's not a clean break between them.
No, it's crucial to see it as a fluid and porous continuum. You have fascinating transitional films defying easy categorization. Like Touch of Evil may be the last classic noir and the first neo-noir.
Or Point Blank from '67.
Right, some call it the first full neo-noir, but it still feels transitional from the classic era. It's blurry.
And you mentioned the production code, the Hays Code. Its collapse in the 60s must have been huge for neo-noir.
Absolutely massive. This rigid set of moral guidelines had strictly policed content for decades, limiting sex, violence, moral ambiguity. Its demise meant neo-noir filmmakers suddenly had freedom to explore themes completely off-limits before.
Pushing boundaries with grittier, more explicit narratives and visuals.
Exactly. It opened up a vast, new creative space to depict a world feeling much more complex, often more dangerous, than the sanitized version allowed by the code. It allowed for a newfound realism and freedom of expression.
Now, there's a theoretical lens we can use here too, right? Jameson's theory of postmodernism.
Yes, Frederick Jameson.
Yeah.
He suggests neo-noir, for example, often functions as nostalgia films, a form of pastiche.
Pastiche meaning, like borrowing styles.
Kind of. Think of it like sampling in music. Not necessarily parody, but evoking a feeling of the past. Maybe because, as Jameson argued, artists might be unable to develop distinctive styles of their own in an age of late capitalism. Culture becomes commodified, fragmented. It reflects an inability to fashion truly original representations of our current experience.
But maybe revisionary noir is different.
Well, an interesting speculation from our sources is that revisionary noir films is possibly a sign that postmodern culture is finally beginning to enter the political phase that Jameson speculated about. By actively connecting past and present, offering new interpretations, they suggest a different future is possible. They might help us regain what Jameson called cognitive mapping.
Helping us find our bearings in a complex world.
Exactly, helping us understand our place within a world that often feels overwhelming, chaotic, giving us new ways to navigate our contemporary landscape by re-examining the old.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, looking at how this dark vision continues to play out in recent cinema, 21st century stuff. It's not just rehashing, it's reinterpretation.
Indeed. We see a strong, recurring focus on memory, identity, the nature of the mind. Take Christopher Nolan's Memento from 2000.
With the reverse chronology, the memory loss.
Right, anterograde amnesia, unable to form new memories, living in a constant present. That profound dissolution of a central personality, the postmodern feel profoundly Noirish, explores how fragile self is when memory fails.
Then you have David Lynch's Mulholland Doctor from 2001. Very different take on memory.
Totally different. Unlike Memento's lack of recall, Lynch's film features an excess of recall and imaginings, blurring dream and nightmare, creating ambiguous identities like Betty Diane. Shows how even ordinary Hollywood seethes with uncanny dread, hidden violence, echoes classic noir themes of illusion, corruption.
And you were never really here. That felt very raw.
Lynn Ramsey's film from 2017, yeah. A visceral, direct portrayal of severe PTSD. It unflinchingly explores the psychological fore and aftermath of events with its fragmented perspective, brutal immediacy, relentless focus on trauma. Feels like a descent into the character's haunted mind.
And when it comes to the classic elements, sex, violence, the city modern noir pushes boundaries even further, thanks to that pre- and post-code.
Oh, absolutely. Jane Campion's In the Cut from 2003 is a bold, sexual take on noir from combined female voices. Explores the erotic allure of danger as the protagonist navigates a dark, predatory urban landscape.
And Collateral, Michael Mann's film.
Yeah, Collateral from 2004. Notable not just for its gripping narrative, but its technical advances. Specifically, its full use of the digital RD camera, capturing the electronic urban night of LA in a way never seen before. Shimmering, dangerous, plus a fascinating character transformation twisting classic tropes.
And Sin City is impossible to ignore here.
Crucial. 2005, stemming directly from its graphic novel origins, leverages CGI green screen to perfectly recreate the comic's stark, near-monochrome world with those startling splashes of color, white or yellow for blood.
Allowing it to push violence and sexual themes way beyond classic noir.
Openly embracing repressed desires, turning the city itself into this hyper-stylized, dangerous character. A relentless hymn to urban depravity.
The anti-hero also gets a fresh coat of paint, often in unexpected settings. That seems part of the revisionary aspect.
Exactly. Consider Rian Johnson's Brick from 2005. Ingeniously reimagines the classic hard-boiled detective narrative in a high school confidential setting.
Really? High school noir?
Yeah. It cleaves surprisingly close to early noir structure, but with a youth cast. A protagonist who's a tough guy against type, clearly influenced by Dashiell Hammett.
And David Cronenberg's A History of Violence.
Also 2005. A powerful, unsettling example of a mild-mannered, seemingly innocent small-town guy whose former life of crime brutally reclaims him. Cronenberg focuses intensely on Tom Stahl's Janus personality, the good family man, the ruthless killer, and the destructive impact this re-emerging violence has on his family. You can't escape your past.
And noir's reach has truly gone global now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Embracing unconventional narratives, perspectives.
That's one of the most exciting developments. Guillaume Canet's Tell No One from 2006 transports noir to a stylish European setting. Notably, it focuses on a redeemed love rather than doomed affairs, and ironically, it's drenched in sunshine, subverting the usual gloom.
Interesting twist.
Then there's Nuri Bilge Ceylan's Three Monkeys from 2008, a Turkish auteur film. A profoundly fatalistic downward spiral, intense emphasis on Chekhovian interactions, unspoken tensions, minor details leading to major consequences, all shrouded in a very Turkish sense of noir.
And Red Riding. That felt very bleak.
Julian Gerald's Red Riding, The Year of Our Lord 1974 from 2009, chilling Brit punk noir, lauded for its crisp, energized bleakness, its unflinching focus on systemic police corruption, abuse of power, captures that fatal misery of a society rotting from within.
And one more recent one.
Began's long day's journey into night from 2018, breathtaking Chinese film, offers a truly labyrinthine, noir-inspired dream logic experience. Radical reworking of noir language, fractured memory, non-linear story, even unique use of 3D achieving states of consciousness never realized before on screen. Immersive, almost hallucinatory.
And briefly, Drive, 2011.
Yeah, Nicholas Winding Refn's film. A neo-noir with incredibly gleaming surfaces, stunning cinematography, killer soundtrack, stylized violence, though some critics argue it might lack deep power under the bonnet, maybe prioritizing style over thematic depth.
But a critically important one is Widows from 2018.
Oh yes, Steve McQueen's film. Stands out for its masterful use of noir elements by a Black American director, expertly exposed as a political structure of graft and intimidation in Chicago.
Multiple perspectives, female protagonists forced into crime after their husbands die.
And crucially, it offers a greater sense of community as these women band together against their better judgment. A fantastic example of using noir to critique contemporary social and political issues, giving voice to traditionally marginalized perspectives.
So having explored this rich evolution, a natural question arises. How do filmmakers actually achieve this modern noir look, especially in color? Our Future Source, the lighting company, gives some insights.
Right. It's all about translating those classic black and white principles to a color palette. And the core elements, still sacrosanct, low-key lighting, hard light, and a lot of shadows are paramount. Sculpting light, and maybe more importantly, shadow.
It's fascinating how, even with color and high-tech gear, they're still fundamentally creating darkness to get that moody atmosphere. It's a deliberate choice.
Absolutely. To achieve the classic day-for-night effect, making daylight look like night, they use techniques like tenting around openings, physically covering windows, doorways with dark fabric to block ambient light, allows them to precisely control and place their own artificial lights, creating the illusion of deep night.
And camera work, not the usual fast cuts.
Generally, no. They often prefer static shots and longer cuts, avoiding that rapid, frenetic style. This deliberate pacing adds a chilling and suspenseful feel, lets the acting off the action of the characters play out more theatrically. Dutch angles, those tilted shots, still used strategically to heighten the drama, disorient the viewer, reflect a skewed reality.
So no frantic movement, just letting tension build through stillness, framing, unsettling perspectives. And the lighting design sounds incredibly precise.
It is. Modern filmmakers use specific lights, high-powered LEDs like the Aputure 300 with a spotlight mount for focus beams, the Nova for larger, softer sources, smaller ones like the 60er for accents. They frequently use gels-colored filters like CTB, color temperature blue, to make light extra blue, mimicking cold, stark moonlight.
And they often pair blue with orange.
Yes, that blue light is often purposefully paired with an orange sodium vapor type light, common in urban street lighting. Creates striking color complementarity because, as the source explains, blue and orange really look well together. Creates visual depth, a sense of unnatural atmospheric urban glow, a heightened, hyper-real world through color.
And the classic noir Venetian blind effect. So iconic. How do they still get those sharp shadows with hard light?
That's key and speaks directly to the lighting choice. You can only get Venetian blinds if you're using a hard light. Soft lights would diffuse the shadows, make them blurry. They use a gobo, basically a stencil placed in front of the light, to create those sharp, distinct patterns.
Venetian blinds, gel bars, tree branches.
Exactly. Those impressions of hard lighting that are classic noir tropes. Hard light, while sometimes less flattering because it creates strong shadows, is embraced in noir precisely because it adds some mystery and drama. It's about stark contrasts, not conventional beauty.
And even production design plays a crucial, subtle role in setting mood and informing character without dialogue.
Absolutely. Production design is storytelling. For example, a killer's lair scenario mentioned in one source, the set might have boxing equipment suggesting brutality, golf clubs hinting at suburban normalcy, and maybe an ominous saw next to a Buddha.
Creates that visual dissonance.
Exactly. All contributing to a moody and dark atmosphere, subtly telling a story about the character's conflicted nature, hidden depths, twisted morality. Every object conveys unease, psychological complexity.
Okay, so if we really connect this all to the bigger picture, what this entire deep dive profoundly reveals is that film noir is far more than just a fleeting genre from a specific era.
Definitely not. It's a continuous, evolving utterance in cinematic history, a persistent dialogue with darkness. It's constantly adapting, reflecting, even anticipating collective anxieties and universal psychological truths. A testament to the enduring human fascination with the darker side of life, a mirror to our collective subconscious.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you look at films from now on? Whether you're drawn to the stark, iconic shadows of classic noir, the bold, often more violent colors of neo-noir, or the challenging, often experimental narratives of revisionary noir.
Understanding its deep roots in historical trauma, its profound connection to psychological theory, and its distinct visual language, it can radically deepen your appreciation for so many films.
You'll begin to identify those familiar tropes, the femme fatale, the anti-hero, the claustrophobic city, the moral compromise, and recognize unexpected twists everywhere. Perhaps even in stories you hadn't initially thought of as noir. It's like unlocking a secret language of cinema.
It really is. And this journey into the shadows, it raises an important question for all of us. If noir is fundamentally about revealing the shadow parts of humanity and society, exposing our collective anxieties and fears, what new shadows do you think our current world is casting that might inspire the next wave of these profoundly dark films?